Hi, hello. It is Meg Linehan, and you are listening to Full Time. Now, today, I don't usually do the intro anymore, so it's very strange for me to be back in this seat. But the reason why I'm doing it is because I actually got an email from a listener a couple of weeks ago that had two very specific questions. And it immediately went into our little group chat because I thought it was a great topic. So Kurt P sent me this email and asked two very straightforward questions. Why is NWSL attendance down in 2025? And what factors are causing NWSL attendance to drop? Now, before we get into all that, and we went all across the league to try to grapple with this question, but first, I got to bring in my co-host, Tamerra Griffin. Tamerra, how are you? Does it feel weird to be on the other side of this now?
Yes, I always have to fight the urge to dance during the intro music before I normally go on, and now I was able to go full out, which was great. But yes, definitely a little uncomfortable. I'm doing well. I've been in New York the past few days. I need to get back home to California because it feels like summertime here, and if you've ever spent a summer in New York, you know how exhausting that can be in the best way. I've been doing a lot of dancing, having a lot of fun, but I'm good. Excited to talk about NWSL attendance. Shout out Kurt for reaching out to you. I think it's really cool that we're doing a whole episode based on listener feedback. It just goes to show how seriously we take the time that everyone takes to reach out to us with their questions, thoughts, concerns. So this is a really special one. And just from doing the research, it's been really eye-opening to really understand how important this question is for our listeners too, you know?
Yes. And it is, you know, what's funny too is like when I got this, you know, I'm mentally always now kind of filtering things through my Vermont experience, right? Because also like I don't get to go to NWSL games as much as I used to anymore. I really have to like put effort into traveling for games. I'm obviously traveling less this year because of the baby, but having gone through this summer experience and like seeing what the demand for tickets was like with Vermont Green, the fact that, you know, the stadium capacity was only 2,500, they had to add seats on the field, they had, you know, 2,500 outside watching through fences, and also PS shout out just Tuesday announcing that they have a women's team finally in the works. Very exciting. So stay tuned on that front. I'm sure I will be yapping so much more about that. But it is, I think it's just it's so interesting to see where the NWSL is in this moment. And I do I think we can just go right to the data because our lovely producer Theo made so many charts for us. I love it when he makes a little chart and he color codes it and he puts it in our little working script so that way we can just look at it as we're recording. But, you know, attendance as of right now this season is down. Not by like a huge amount, but by an amount where I think if you're looking at it, especially honestly, like if you're an owner, you're looking at the state and you're kind of going, where are we at right now, right? Like, and certain markets are up a little bit, but no one is like crazy up year over year compared to last year. And so there is this sense of, you know, is there a bigger problem here?
Totally. And this has actually been probably one of the most enriching episodes to like help produce and do research on, because in looking at this data, a lot of things stand out, and the things that stand out in the discussions that they've prompted amongst ourselves, and definitely the conversations we're going to have with our guests, really show how much nuance there is to some of the data and the numbers that we're seeing. So for example, the San Diego Wave in 2023, average attendance 19,417, dropped in 2024, average attendance 18,233, and in 2025 dropped a little bit more, 13,136. So they're in the red right now. And when you look at the San Diego Wave, the roster that they had when they started, obviously they got an expansion team push. 2023 was a World Cup year, for example. These are things that we really need to take into consideration to help contextualize these numbers. And I think for me, one of the sort of like secondary questions that's really important is, even when we're seeing this drop off, we need to know sort of how much to be freaking out. And that's why I think the context is so important.
Yeah, totally. And what I did really like about the data that, you know, when Theo ran the numbers, he did actually remove a lot of the like bigger one-off games. So like, for instance, we will be talking to someone from Chicago Stars FC a little bit later in the show. And the Wrigley game was actually removed because selling tickets and getting a high attendance number for a one-off game, or the Bay FC game, right? Baseball stadiums, I think, immediately do need to kind of be put in their own category, where
total outliers.
We've seen this narrative around single game attendance records being broken in the NWSL, which is a great, I understand why the NWSL wants to lean on that storyline, but then when you're looking at the actual underlying data, which is what we're currently looking at right now, you kind of see this plateau start to emerge, either a slight dip or a plateau, except for, there are some markets where you're seeing that sort of strong and steady-ish growth. Like I think about North Carolina has been trending in the right direction over the past 3 years, which I think is really good. Kansas City has obviously stayed exactly flat because they have a capacity stadium, and it is what it is in Kansas City. So, there are some signs of strength, there are some question marks, and I think there's also just a factor of, we don't want to talk about playoffs, because I think it's so much harder to sell a ticket for a regular season game. I think you even think to this past weekend, right? And the attendance number out of Angel City on a Monday night that was in the 11,000s, and everyone looking at that and being like, yikes. It's like, yeah, it's a Monday night in LA.
Yeah.
I don't know what we expected.
Some people might find that impressive for a Monday night in LA. Personally, I was like, for someone to take on a weeknight to sit in, traffic potentially, pay for parking, you're getting home probably a little bit later than you normally do, because Californians, we love our sleep. We love to wake up early. To me, that could also be read as people are still dedicated. But again, that goes back to sort of the context. And just to sort of read the average year-on-year attendance in the NWSL, 2022, it was 7,894. 2023, big jump to 10,479. That's a 25% increase. 2024, more increase, 11,080. And in 2025, it's dropped off back to 10,238. So very much reason for Kurt to have written in. And when we put a call out, again, shout out Theo, to fans about how this is factoring into their level of commitment to a club when it comes to season ticket holders, we have a lot of really interesting information that I think, honestly, this episode is like a gift in a lot of ways to people who work in the front offices of clubs, because this is really important feedback, especially as a lot of clubs right now are really leaning hard into getting people to commit to season tickets for next season. So lots of numbers to crunch, lots of context to share, but that's why we're here. We're very excited to do it.
I think it's one of the things that I think is just going to be really interesting is, again, we're in uncharted territory with the NWSL, right? We've never had a pro league that's lasted past 3 years. Now we're in this sort of generational fight for fans in women's soccer. And I think this is such an interesting time where we're not, yes, Euros, right? But I think we've seen this trend across the NWSL this year in particular of, you look at the Washington Spirit, Racing Louisville, all these teams figuring out how do we get new people into the stadium to then hopefully convert them into a fan. So I don't think we could have better timing for this conversation right now.
Completely. All right, before we dive into it, make sure you're following us on all of our socials at TA Fulltime on Instagram, TikTok. Like I always say, we're posting content on those channels that you won't get here, which is saying something because we give you a lot on this show. You can also watch it on YouTube if you prefer to watch your podcasts. As always, you can get them anywhere else that you get your podcasts. If you prefer to email us like Kurt did, you can reach out to us at fulltime@theathletic.com. As proven, we are always checking our emails and inboxes because we really enjoy hearing from you. And these questions and comments that you guys share with us are just as important for us to just know what's on your guys' minds. So shout out to everyone who leaves reviews, who writes to us, who shares their thoughts and feelings, because we really do take that very seriously. All right, don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're going to dive even deeper into attendance. And like I said, all the context that we need to be considering. We're also going to hear from fans who shared with us how they are thinking about season tickets heading into next season. All right, Meg. So as stated, attendance numbers in the NWSL on average are down. This is a fact. But as we've also said, there are a lot of factors to consider in what this actually means. So where do you think we should start in terms of better understanding this decrease in attendance?
Yeah, I think as we were discussing this, I mean, there are so many factors that go into attendance, that go into the decision to buy a ticket, but we came up, I think, with kind of four main buckets I guess five main buckets in terms of what we're thinking about for factors here. And what was great is we actually got voice notes from folks on most of these things. So I think let's start just with honestly, one of the most basic sort of logistical things, which is accessibility and facilities. So where is the stadium? What is your transportation to the stadium? Is there parking? Is the parking expensive? When in the week are games being played? Are you trying to go on a Monday night in LA, or are you going on a Saturday at 7 p.m. where, you can breeze on in? What is the schedule? Is the stadium an attraction? Is there stuff around it? What's the match day experience like? So we've actually got two folks. Let's start with Rachel from Chicago, because Chicago obviously about to go through a major change.
This might be a simple answer, but I'm a Chicago Stars fan, and it's largely because of the change in stadium location next year. If you live in this city, the current stadium is basically impossible to get to if you don't have a car. With the move to Northwestern next year, I'll be able to quickly and easily take the train there. Additionally, I know the team has been pretty terrible and the front office is a disaster, but I really believe in a lot of the players themselves and want them to have success. And we can't build a better team if there isn't any financial support. I do think the owners need to be doing a lot more to help with the team, but the reality is that they aren't. So I guess I'll help where I can, and right now that's buying season tickets.
In an interesting sort of, I guess, counter example for North Carolina, Liz here from North Carolina is not actually planning on renewing her season ticket, so let's listen why.
This is Liz. I am in North Carolina, NC Courage fan here, and I was a season ticket holder with the Courage this is my third season now, and I decided not to renew for next season, basically because I'm not impressed with the direction that the club is going in. There's no plan for a stadium upgrade, and they're not even hinting at a vision for the future. At the season ticket member exclusive event, the club kind of mentioned that they know that fans aren't happy with the stadium and said something along the lines of, "We're not blind," but also said that they wouldn't commit to anything and made it sound like there's nowhere to go in Raleigh. So I'm just not really impressed by what's happening with the leadership at the club. Also, the membership perks have really eroded in the past few years, and they're making a distinction between members who pay in full versus those who do payment plans in a way that just feels weird and unfair. Plus, the ticket discount isn't enough to really move me. So I'll continue to go to games when I can, but the season ticket membership just didn't make sense for me.
When it comes to pricing, we heard from Kathy and KC, who wrote, "We've had season tickets to the KC Current since they came to KC. Games are a lot of fun and the stadium is awesome, but the cost of parking last year was announced long after tickets were sold, and it's steep. We chose not to renew for this year because of cost." And for context, a season parking pass at KC costs around $50 per game.
All right, next we're moving into star power. And now this is it's a big category, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it does drive fandom in a lot of ways. And I think we've seen that trend move on, especially within the NWSL world, where people are coming in with the entry point of the U.S. Women's National Team players. So are there recognizable names on the team? Are there U.S. Women's National Team players? Are there players that, regardless to the fans' relationship to the team or the standings, are going to be a draw? For instance, let's say Trinity Rodman at Washington Spirit. Has the team traded away one of their star players? And here we've got Brittany, who's in Southern California, talking about Angel City, because Angel City's been through some changes this year.
Brittany here. I'm an Angel City season ticket holder and have been since 2023. I have lived out of town since their inaugural season and now go to significantly fewer games than I used to in 2022 and 2023. My main issue with getting to games is the home schedule. It's terrible. Weekday and Sunday games in Los Angeles are very difficult for out-of-town travelers. In 2024, we only had 2 regular season Saturday games, the home opener and one right after 4th of July. In 2025, we've had 3 home games on a Saturday, one of them on Memorial Day weekend, where people often travel places, and the other 2 on consecutive weekends in June. Back-to-back weekend trips are not easy. Every other game is usually on a Friday or Sunday, and some have even been on a Thursday or a Monday. Hello, traffic. Other issues that have made traveling to the games less appealing include the baffling front office decision to trade our franchise and best player for much less than she was worth, and the poor performances on the field. Each year, the tickets and parking get more expensive, and it's a journey to get to LA, even locally. I likely won't renew my season tickets next season unless things turn around.
And I think related to that, this maybe is a factor that we haven't discussed super heavily yet, but on-pitch performance, which sometimes is related to star power. How well is the team doing this season compared to last? And how are those performances affecting maybe the overall game experience? I think that sometimes when we talk about things like attendance, because we're considering so many other factors around the game, like marketing, like cost, like access, it can sometimes be easy to forget the reason why we're all showing up, like just watch the ball move around the pitch and to cheer on players. And honestly, also track performances. I think especially if you're a season ticket holder, because you, I imagine, want to feel some sense of progress with the team in order to stay invested. So it was really interesting to hear from people how much on-pitch performance and the sense of potential is factoring into their decision. So Jean in Portland wrote into Theo on Blue Sky. I'm going to read what they said. Thorne's season ticket holder for 8 years, did not renew. Current owners and management are invisible. Coaching staff needs to go, a complete reset needed. Thorns are no longer fun to watch. Hina trade, referring to Hina Sugita, who was recently traded to Angel City. Seriously? ? If you can't keep her happy, changes should be made. Strong words. Not totally surprising when you consider the culture of Portland's fan base. They are not ones to hold back or dilute their feelings, but you really do get a sense of the sort of compounding concerns, we'll say, that Jean had with this club. It's not just about them trading Hina Sugita, it's about the ownership.
Yes.
It's about the coaching staff. It's about the involvement or lack thereof, according to Jean, in the community, which is really, really telling, I think, when you think about what it means to be a season ticket holder and the specific set of expectations I think they have of a club compared to a casual fan.
Yes. And Tamerra, that brings us perfectly into our final point, which is the relationships and the community around NWSL teams. And this was the one that I think stuck out the most for me as like a recent transplant who found a community via a soccer team, right? Mm-hmm. Of how much is the fan base or the ownership endearing itself for other fans to attend games, right? Like if you're not sitting in the supporter section, but you're watching the supporter section, right? Like, are you going like, oh, that's a good time? Are the owners in the community, do they feel like a part of the community? Do they feel accessible? Because what I think is interesting is that we've seen this trend in the NWSL. You think about a Michelle Kang or Angel City, right? Like they're visible, they're there, they're present. That's a real factor. And how are teams sticking up for their communities in times of adversity, which is like more important than ever right now, and I think is going to be a massive factor moving forward. So let's hear from Guthrie about renewing his Spirit season tickets, because this to me was such an interesting and I think reaffirming point of the whole shebang.
My name is Guthrie. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and I was contemplating not renewing my Spirit season tickets for next season, mainly because of the price increase. They went from about $240 for this season to about $320 for next season in the supporter section, but I was swayed to renew them after seeing the free DC chants and the way that the team was the only professional team in DC that has said anything about the federal occupation of the city. And after seeing kind of how the community kind of came together at the games, and especially in the supporter section, that was what swayed me to renew for what will be my 4th year as a Spirit season ticket holder.
All right, so we've run quite a gamut, Meg, I think, when we talk about all the different factors to consider, and especially from a fan perspective about what it means to invest in a team vis-a-vis becoming a season ticket holder. But it was not comprehensive because, as we've said, there are a number of factors to consider. Are there any others that maybe didn't necessarily have a voice note or a written sort of feedback that I think we need to be considering, or that you think we need to be considering?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's about to send us a voice note about the fact that the NWSL does not currently have a chief marketing officer, right? But I think that is something of just that league-wide, top-down marketing approach and how that's playing out, but also the impact of club marketing. We're actually going to talk to a couple clubs about how they see this, right, from the other side. But I also think, we have to consider, is it a World Cup year, right? Like, are we going to see that World Cup bump? Are we going to see an Olympics bump? Are we going to see, like, the star, the rise of triple espresso maybe having an impact on this league? But then there are, to our last point, there are political forces, there are economic forces. The past two leagues started in the middle of recessions, and I think that's been a major concern at this given time, right? And, like, we don't know how that's going to play out for the NWSL right now. And then to a previous episode, climate, etc., weather, all of that kind of stuff. So, like, not a comprehensive list by any stretch, but there are a lot of other things that, like, I mean, we'd have to probably do 4 episodes on this to get into all of these different things.
100%. And a lot of these factors impact and affect the other. They're all interrelated. I think especially when you think about the state of our political landscape in this country and the economy. Who feels safe even maybe going to games right now if they belong to a community that is under threat? And how might that be affecting their pocketbook and their ability to commit to even a single ticket, let alone a season ticket? So there's a lot of interconnectedness, I think, between these factors, which is, again, why it's so important for us to be having a comprehensive conversation about this, because it's not just about the numbers. It rarely is. All right, let's bring in even more voices. You already mentioned that we're speaking with people who work for clubs. We've got Gotham FC, Chicago Stars, 2 very different clubs in different places, which is why I think it's important to have these different perspectives. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the show. Before we get started, if you could just tell us your name and your position at Gotham.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Laura Petro. I'm the Vice President of Brand Marketing and Fan Experience at Gotham FC.
Amazing. So before we dive super deep, Laura, can you just give us sort of your take on Gotham's home attendance?
Yeah, so we have, obviously focused a lot on getting more fans in the stands. I've been with the club this is my 2nd season, and really proud to share that since 2023, we have seen a 38% increase in attendance for our home matches. So obviously a ton of growth. This past year, in this season alone, we saw our 2nd largest regular season attendance record in club history, which was our August 9th Keep Her in the Game match, sponsored by Dove, against the Washington Spirit. It's been like a whirlwind of record breakers. Like, I feel like every game we're obviously trying to just sell as many tickets as possible, and it's been amazing just to see that growth. Also worth sharing, our home opener this past year was the most tickets sold for a home opener in club history. And we've broken the top 10 of our attendance records in club history, I think 3 or 4 times this year. So we keep, trying to up-level it, and it's been fantastic to see all the work that's gone into it really, really make an impact and get people showing up.
Laura, just in terms of the fan experience part of your job, because I feel like, when we talk about attendance, we're not just talking about someone making that decision to spend $30 on a ticket or whatever it is and come out to Harrison and, get themselves on there's all of these pieces that go into it. And I do think there has been such an interesting shift in terms of game day experience within the NWSL and trying to figure out how to make that better and make every home game feel like an event. What are you getting from feedback for fans in terms of when they come to games, what they feel like, especially, I think part of the challenge is if you can get someone in for the first time, then you can convert them so much more easily. So how are you trying to deal with that sort of problem?
Yeah, so there's a reason fan experience is in my job description, right? Like, that's actually what I started when I joined the club. Like, my remit was really to build out the fan experience. And we knew, we had just won a championship. We had the best product on the field. We now need to make the best product off the field, right? And the beauty and the challenge of the market that we're in is there are infinite ways you could spend your time and money, right? And so we want people to choose us, and we want people to come and spend their time and money. So you talked about fan feedback. We are obsessed with fan feedback. When we started last year, we started for the first time doing post-match surveys and measuring our net promoter score after every match. There are big things that we sometimes can't control, but then there are small things that we can control. Like we had fans write in surveys last year that, you know, they were waiting for long times in lines for the bathroom. We have more female fans than male fans, so we actually converted some of the men's bathrooms to be women's rooms. Small thing, we put signs up, you know, when they come in, and people were really happy and they noticed. And you know, that's again one of many examples. We always know that our Pride game is something that people really look forward to every year. So we said to ourselves this year, like, how can we make it even better than last year? We did our first ever drag brunch. Like, we literally put on a drag brunch at the stadium. You could buy a whole ticket package where you got food and drinks, and people were like, what is happening? Like, we sold hundreds of tickets. So it was clear that like the demand is there, and then the feedback we got was just like through the roof. There are a million examples that I could probably rattle off to you, but it always comes back to listening to our fans, doing what we can with like the resources that we have, and getting creative on, hey, like let's try this time, and really not being afraid to like experiment based on what we're hearing. So it does always kind of come back to those surveys. We've been really proud to maintain a net promoter score for our matches, like in the high 70s and 80s, which is sort of unheard of. So we kind of try to tailor it to our different fan segments as well, and really listen to what they're looking for.
You touched on something that it really informs my next question, Laura, which is, listeners don't know that Laura and I met in person last weekend at the Gotham Seattle game. And one of the things that I was really struck by, I've been to several Gotham games before, but I noticed how many young people were at that game, like young soccer players. I saw some of the Rutgers women's soccer players there, and definitely younger. Lots of families, of course. But you're also mentioning, you know, things like drag brunch. And when I think about New York, New Jersey, and all of the different sort of like generational demographics that there are, I'm really curious how you're sort of balancing when it comes to growing and maintaining a network of supporters, how you're sort of thinking about the generational sort of distribution, making sure that you're engaging with like young kids and families who could potentially grow with this team and become like Gotham families with, you know, the Brooklyn crowds who will go to drag brunch, whether it's connected to a soccer game or not, and how you sort of balance those
right
things.
At me with that one. I live in Brooklyn. Yes. So you're hitting the nail on the head. I think for us, like, it's one of the most like electric and magical things about our game days is like, people say this to me all the time when they come to their first Gotham game. They're like, this is just a fan base like I've never seen. Like the true diversity of who's in the stands is really, I think you feel it, and it creates a different vibe and experience than you maybe get in other leagues and teams. And I think for us, you know, youth soccer is a huge audience for us. So we have really done a lot to partner with those communities. So that is, we have coach training, parent training. We bring those girls out to the games for free. So there's a lot that goes on from like a community development standpoint. We have something called CarMax Kids, where CarMax actually sponsors a section where our community team identifies schools or communities that we want to give free access to the games. So they get t-shirts and they get a whole special section. So there's like a lot on the community outreach and development piece. Then there's, you know, we have really awesome game day experiences for groups who want to come with their team, with their school. You know, we had like the match you were at was School Spirit Day. So we had a lot of programming. We had a youth soccer parade, which is actually something we created this year because, again, goes back to like the listening to fans piece. We continue to hear a lot of appetite for like on-field experiences from these groups. Like, you know, who doesn't want to be able to get their kid on the field of a professional soccer stadium? Like, that's so cool. So we were like, wow, there's a lot of demand for this. what do we do about it? We made a parade. And so all the kids actually who are part of those groups get to walk around and, get an on-field moment. We, so we've created also like new packages and offerings to service the group interest on that front. And then I think the third piece is really like the environment, the programming, some of the stuff I was mentioning, like you can come with your family and your young kids and again, not just get a great sporting event, like you can entertain them for a whole day. We have a live band at every match. Like you would think you're at like, my favorite moments are like I walk over and there's like a group of 47-year-old girls like moshing to Pink Pony Club. That's but people are like, oh my God, we have entertainment. We have, like I said, the face painting, the games, like there's always something to, I would say in our Fan Fest pregame to kind of, so that if you are driving in, if you are making that trip, like you are getting a lot out of it. So I think there's kind of, those three pieces, right? There's the community outreach and development. There's offerings and packages and getting, listening to what those groups want and tailoring our offerings to them. And then there's the third piece around the entertainment and the, offerings when you do get there so that it's super fun and unforgettable.
Or just in terms of, there's also, I guess, the dedicated supporters, right, who have been with this team since Sky Blue days and have been on the journey from Piscataway to Sports Illustrated Stadium. And I'm just wondering in terms of, trying to retain those people and make their game day experience better, but also I wanted to ask you about the Blueprint, which is this new approach to season tickets. And I think one of the things that was immediately jumping out to me is the fact that there's a price lock for tickets. And so, in terms of like being able to justify a price lock, how do you go about that process?
Oh, yes. I will not bore you with all the details that we have, but as you can imagine, it's not a willy-nilly decision. I'll maybe start there and then talk about the supporters group. So, so the Blueprint, you're obviously familiar, is our new season ticket membership. And I think that's the benefit of being in a young league and particularly like our ownership group, our team is very bold in like what we do, and we don't say like, oh, this is how it's been done. We kind of say like, how should it be done? So when we looked at season tickets for this year, we said, like we have ambitious goals, right? We want to grow our season ticket member base. We want more people to be on this journey with us, and so ambitious goals require an ambitious plan. And so that's really how we conceived of this idea of the Blueprint, because it spoke to a lot of things. I think first and foremost, what we surveyed our members, specifically our season ticket members, but also people who weren't yet season ticket members, like what do you like about Gotham? We'd ask them a lot of questions, and I think something that came through super strongly is it is more than just something people do. It is for people who are choosing to be season ticket members, who are interested. It's like, Gotham is part of my identity. Gotham is a community that like I am a part of. And I think the other side of that is we heard a lot from people, and we had a lot of data telling us people, it's like they want to be part of this community and they want to be part of shaping the future of women's soccer. And so that is kind of how we led to this reinvented membership, right? Because we were like, how do we give that back to the fans? And how do we create something that really responds to, hey, you are part of this movement. We're all going to look back in 5-10 years, and those first 5,000 people are going to be like, I was one of the first. And it really does, like, it's a little corny, but it gives me like chills to think about how many people can say that, right? And how many people will be able to say, like, I was that early believer, and I took that leap. And so I think, to bring it back to the price lock, like we took that very seriously. We take it very seriously that people want to spend their time, money, with us. And so we said to ourselves, like, what can we do? And I won't get into the nitty gritty, but we did the math, and it works out, right? Because if we can continue to grow and we can honor those prices for people for the next 5 years, and we did our due diligence and we got our board and everyone's support to say, like, this is something, we want to recognize the fans who are those early adopters and really be able to deliver a benefit that, like, a lot of people probably would not want to kind of make that investment. So I would say that's all that on the price lock. And then, there's other benefits to the Blueprint. Like we're offering a varsity jacket this year as the member gift, which is really priceless because you won't be able to buy it, but it's valued at $150. You'll get to customize it. So we really kind of took a couple of the things that we heard from members consistently as being super important and really like built the membership around that. So yeah, we've been really excited by the early momentum and response. And I think, you know, being a marketer, like there's always these moments where you're like, I don't know, like we're going to put it out there and we're going to see. And I think it's been really fantastic just to see the response and excitement and people really responding to those commitments and those benefits that we're delivering. We have a dedicated, Corinne is her name, on our team, a dedicated person who is really like the main liaison to our supporters group and sits with them, and we are constantly, both like formally and informally, I would say, talking of like if we have ideas, or the blueprint is a good example. Like we were able to get some of their names like on this membership wall first before everyone else. So we're able to kind of like have these informal touch points where we get feedback and we listen. And then, you know, she has a very regular cadence where if we are launching a big initiative or, you know, something comes up, like I think building that relationship with our supporters group such that there's really like a two-way street. And we can bring ideas to them and talk to them about ideas and vice versa. So I think that's been fantastic to just get feedback from all directions so that, again, we can kind of keep iterating and keep getting better every time.
It's so interesting to hear all of these different sort of features between the varsity jacket, between these sort of long-term commitments that essentially and ideally, I imagine, are going both ways between the club and supporters. It makes me sort of think of school and what it means to maybe become like an alumni of the club and, you know, being with them throughout this whole journey. It's so interesting. And maybe I have a little bit of recency bias since there was just sort of like a school night theme at the Gotham game. Yeah, it's cutting over.
But it really is so true, and I think that's a great analogy, because I think if that's the type of connection we can continue to foster, right, like we're doing something right. And so I think continuing to water that in whatever way we can and grow that relationship with the club, like that's, you know, what we want to do.
Makes a lot of sense. Laura, what interesting insight. Gotham is, of course, in such a rich place that seems like there's a lot of potential for growth. We could ask you a million more questions, but we will let you get back to work, your fun job that you have so much to do for. But thank you for stopping by the show and sharing this insight. It's really valuable.
My name is Kay Bradley, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer for the Chicago Stars FC.
All right. Well, first of all, Kay, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We're delighted to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. All right, let's talk about attendance in Chicago, because I really want to, you know, you're coming at this team from a more recent point of view. So I'm really just wondering, like, what are you hearing from fans in Chicago in terms of the feedback of, you know, getting out to SeatGeek, in terms of seeing a game at SeatGeek and knowing that there is change on the horizon for this team. But, you know, what has the feedback been for you in Chicago?
Yeah, we are really excited. I think you're aware that we'll be playing our 2026 season in Evanston. And the feedback that we've heard from fans is overwhelmingly positive. The biggest challenge that we've faced with fans at SeatGeek, and we've gotten a lot of comments since I first started, and I've heard it's been over the years, is just how challenging it is to get out to SeatGeek because it's not accessible via public transportation. So this opportunity for us, while distance-wise, it's actually fairly consistent distance from the city, it's much more accessible for fans who don't have cars, which is a lot of our younger fan base, who is doing away with their cars, our Gen Y, our Gen Z, and opting for public transportation.
And Kay, sticking with this huge transition that the Chicago Stars are making from SeatGeek Stadium in Bridgeview to Martin Stadium in Evanston, can you sort of paint a picture for people who have not been to Chicago or have not been to a Stars game about just how big of a move this is? And then also, I know you mentioned earlier that for Chicago Stars supporters who maybe don't have access to a car, moving a little bit closer to the city is hugely advantageous for them in terms of access. But have there been any negatives or challenges to this move that people need need to know about as well?
The stadium experience in Evanston is just a bit different. For those that aren't as familiar with the city of Chicago, the Martin Stadium is located in Evanston, within walking distance of restaurants and bars and stores and other entertainment options. So the benefit of us going to a place like that is that even if the distance might be further for someone who than SeatGeek, once you're there, it's really a destination where people can go, they can have lunch, they can go to a game, they can explore the lakefront. There's a lot of activities that they can do with kids and family and friends. So it extends the experience beyond just the 90 minutes of the pitch, or even what we're doing in fan zone, the 90 minutes before the game starts, to really create a holistic experience that is worth people's time, effort, energy, and makes it an option that people want to spend their Saturday afternoon or Sunday and being part of our community. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits for us of making this move. The stadium itself also allows for us to have more unique experiences for our fans. We have an extended and expanded fan zone. We have more options within the stadium for fan engagement. So we think that the product on the field in the stadium is also going to be better for fans, more engaging for fans, and keep them coming back and wanting to make that trip up to Evanston, even if the distance might be further for them than the original stadium.
Okay, just in terms of when you think about, game day experience, driving up attendance, obviously you did get a first bite of the apple, and I think we have to talk about Wrigley Field as well, just in terms of having these sort of, looking outside of the status quo, knowing, okay, we've got some options and we can drive people to Wrigley Field, right? Like, we know that we can do a one-off event. How have you been able to maybe capture some of those folks who went to Wrigley and then bring them in and be like, okay, listen, here's where we're going. Like, how do you sell people on this new version of the Stars in Evanston?
Yeah, that's a great point, Meg. I think one of the reasons that we were able to bring out a huge crowd to Wrigley was partially because we were making more than just a game out of it. It was really about our opportunity to rally people in the city of Chicago to support women's sports. In addition to that, it was a unique one-off event experience that people wanted to be a part of. I think that's one of the amazing things about Chicago, is that people really want to come out for these one-of-a-kind events and experiences that you can't get anywhere else. And that was, of course, definitely one of them. Our job at those events then is to make sure that the experience in the fan zone, the game day experience in the stadium, in the stands, the product on the field is so spectacular and amazing that people want to keep coming back. And that's really what we were charged with at Wrigley. It's what we were charged with when folks came out to Soldier Field for our doubleheader with the Fire. And it's what we were charged with in our 9-7 match in Evanston. And we feel like we've been able to accomplish that. We will see next year how that translates into more consistent attendance, but we feel really good about how our database has grown, the feedback we're getting in the marketplace about people who attended for the first time and said, oh my gosh, I had no idea that's what a women's soccer experience was all about, and I can't wait to come back. So we're really optimistic about what that means for the future, but that will be our challenge ahead, is how do we consistently deliver an experience that people want to be a part of and want to keep coming back to.
And I imagine you got a lot of feedback, a lot of new information about the recent success that you've seen in bumps sort of in attendance from games like Wrigley, from already having played at Martin Stadium. Kay, I'm curious, when it comes to rallying people, as you mentioned, and specifically, tapping into Chicago's many multicultural communities, people who may not be familiar with the Chicago Stars or women's sports in Chicago in general. What sorts of marketing and outreach are you doing specifically to bring people in who are not familiar with the team? I always think that NWSL teams in multicultural markets really have a leg up because there are just so many communities that you can tap into, especially with the global game. So I'm curious, in Chicago's sort of next phase that it's moving into and the opportunities it presents, how you're approaching that from sort of a marketing and outreach perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first fundamental shift that we've made is since the new ownership is actually investing in marketing. And which is important. to ensure that our marketing investment is commensurate with those of the other teams in the league. And especially in a market like Chicago, when there's a lot of competition, which is why we all live here, but for share of mind and share of wallet and share of time with all of the other incredible activities that are here, making sure that we are investing in marketing to help grow the brand and attract interest and engagement and attendance around our events and our team. But we were also in a really unique position when I first started because we are in the process of relaunching a franchise. In needing to reinvent ourselves to ensure that we are driving greater relevance in the Chicago market and finding ways to resonate with our fan base and all of the different communities that you mentioned. So we've been really committed to that. So in addition to, the traditional or kind of fundamentals of marketing of, driving awareness and letting people know your games are happening and where to watch and how to attend and where to buy tickets, also how do we engage in the community in authentic ways so we are a club that people want to be a part of, that we're a badge, that when people wear our hats and our merchandise and our shirts, they're saying, this is a team for someone like me. It represents my values, my beliefs, and a community that I want to stand with. And so we've been really dedicated in the past, how many months have I been here now? I think like 14 months in terms of finding ways to connect with the community. So that's been everything from our commitment to our Nuestra Ciudad match, where we brought out, I think, for the first ever Lucha Libre performance at a professional sporting event. We've had our players out and in the city and integrating more in the community, everything from Fashion Week to community service events. We've had ongoing collaborations with Chicago artists through our poster series. We did a mural in Evanston with an up-and-coming artist here in Chicago. So we are trying to find those ways to authentically connect with the community, show up for them, so that they in turn will show up for us.
Okay, before we let you out of here and let you get back to work, I do want to ask maybe what feels like a really basic question. I want to preface this by saying I've been to Chicago a lot. There's nothing like Chicago summer, but I do feel like Chicago has some of the strangest spring weather to deal with in the league, just as someone who also, went to Boston Breakers games back in the day. Like, I know what those early season games are like, and trying to convince people to come out and sit through snow, hail, whatever's happening might be a hard sell. But how do you grapple with stuff that you can't control, knowing that that's something that you have to work through in order to get butts in seats?
Well, I think the common through line in sports are things you can't control, and that's both the beauty and the challenge of working in sports. But yes, we are very acutely aware of the challenges we might face in the spring, especially being on the lakefront where there's a little less protection. So we are looking at ways that we can enhance the stadium infrastructure to provide spaces and places where people can be comfortable. And so looking at everything from how the stadium is built to protect from the wind to the fan zone, and making sure that if it is inclement weather, that we have warming stations and things that will make sure that our fans are comfortable and have the amenities that they need. The other thing that I love about Chicago is that people are used to challenging weather situations and often come out in spite of them, or because it actually makes it more interesting and novel. So we have a lot of winter festivals. We have, the Kris Kringle Market. We have things like that, spaces and places where people are outside in, not 70 and sunny weather. So we are actually thinking about ways that we can create that fun, almost like winter-esque environment at some of our early spring matches that will entice people to come out and actually embrace the weather and use it as a way to make it just a little bit different in a sporting event that might not be what you traditionally think of as a sporting event, but something that's unique to Chicago.
Yeah, I will say Chicago Christmas market, pretty undefeated, one of the top ones, right up there with New York City. So
yeah, we're no strangers to bad weather. Everyone is accustomed to bundling up. We just need to mentally get people in that mind state and then do the things that people love in those environments, like hot chocolate and hot toddies and all the things, and make sure that we're delivering those for our fans too, to make it fun even if the weather isn't cooperating.
I love that. All right, Kay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we're definitely excited to see what is in store for Chicago 2026.
Well, thanks so
Thanks,
much for
Kay.
chatting with me. We're excited for next season.
All right, Meg, we've just heard from Kay and Laura. Like I said, 2 different clubs, Chicago, New York, New Jersey, with very different remits, working in different environments. But what stood out the most to you? I mean, they're not even working in the same position within their respective clubs. So it was really interesting to hear sort of how they're each approaching growth and sort of commitment to the clubs in the long term.
I think what is so fascinating about, when we talk about attendance, is just so much of this stuff is out of teams' control, right? And it's not even just about like where a stadium is physically located, right? Because minus Kansas City, no one has ever controlled this in the history of the league, right? And so when I think about Gotham, right, for instance, and the fact of like how much easier it got between having to trek out to Rutgers to what was then, Red Bull Arena, right? Like that was an instant, immediate improvement. So we've seen, but also like you're competing with an MLS team for the same facility and you're always going to be second fiddle. So there's always going to be something that these teams can't really control. Again, we're carving out an exception for Kansas City because they are in the rare boat. But attendance is just, there are so many different factors, but I think fundamentally there's 2 kind of big questions that I'm always going to be thinking about. One, like, how do you bring in new people and tell them that this is like a good, entertaining sports league that they want to be a part of? But also, I still just don't think that the supporters can be overlooked. Like the true diehard people who are going to also like go out and wear your jersey, right? And find and create new friends weather. And like, but also like build the community that you're then going to take advantage of as well. And how do those 2 things live together? Because those are 2 completely different audiences that you have to do 2 completely different things for. And it's a really, I think that's why Portland is such an interesting example too, because even in talking to some of my friends who are out in Portland, there is this sense of like, okay, the ownership isn't local. Do they understand us? But I don't know if that's the same question that new fans who have kind of seen the history of the Thorns, right? And like understand, okay, you walk into that stadium, it's a great time, it's super accessible, there's a fan bar right across the street, the merch is great, all of this stuff. Like these are big questions here.
Yeah, I think what I am taking away from this whole episode, and definitely the conversations we had within it, is sort of like how much straddling these clubs need to do in terms of retaining the people who have long committed to their team and inviting and ensuring that new people want to keep coming back, because those themselves are 2 very different senses of obligation. I'm thinking that if you want to attract someone who's maybe not familiar with the NWSL, who's never been to even a professional women's sporting event, you got to make it as easy for them as possible. So things like access, things like pricing might be a little bit higher on the priority list than someone who is a season ticket holder and has been for 8 years, like Jean in Portland, who needs to see more than sort of what a casual fan might expect. They want to see that community involvement. They want to feel a sense of alignment probably between their own personal values and that the club espouses. That is very different. I mean, that's going to require you to do things that a casual fan who's going to a game for the first time, it might go completely over their heads because so much is going to be new to them compared to a season ticket holder who's seen and done most of it. And that sort of trickles down to like the generational differences too, that we heard Laura mention. I mean, there were so many kids at that Gotham game, Meg. It was crazy in a good way. And when I think about longevity, it makes a lot of sense. But you gotta be able to tap into the Brooklyn, the Long Island City crowd, the Manhattan crowd,
the 21 plus. I mean, exactly. But I think that's always
it's a lot of juggling.
That's such a historic challenge for the NWSL, right? Because when you think about the history of the league, everyone went after the easy market of youth teams. And Portland was really one of the first that was like, wait, but there are people who have their own purchasing power that like can have a beer and like be rowdy and create this atmosphere. And so that's not a new challenge, right? That's not, but it's still an ongoing one. It's still a super crucial one. But I think there's also, we can add in even another further layer, which is the NWSL is not operating in a void, right? And I think the closest thing that people, you know, if you're a women's sports fan, and especially in some of these overlapping markets, and you've got a certain limited budget, you're choosing between NWSL and WNBA games, almost certainly. And can you compare or can you keep up with the WNBA and its growth and everything that it has going for it? Like, if you're going to pick between going to a Gotham game or a Liberty game, two very different experiences, but that's a challenge. And that's one of the bigger ones facing the NWSL anymore. They might not want to say that they're competitive with the WNBA, but in a lot of ways, it's just a limited attention, right? Like, it's going to be limited finances.
Budget.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, before we get out of here too, the other thing that I want us to end with is looking to 2026, right? Which again, Men's World Cup, going to be a whole factor, but also 2 new expansion teams, one with a history in the league and one brand new in Denver. So Denver and Boston. Tamerra, where do you see this going for the NWSL?
I feel optimistic. I mean, one of the things that I didn't recognize until we started talking about attendance was how many sort of one-off years this league has had between the 2023 World Cup, the 2024 Olympics, and obviously the 2023 World Cup did not go well for the U.S. women's national team, but then they had this incredible comeback in 2024. How is that affecting attendance in the NWSL? We had expansion teams in 2024 as well, and now 2 years later we're having expansion years again. I think it's going to be interesting now that in a lot of ways the league is finding some stasis in a lot of other areas to see how Denver and Boston are going to sort of fit into this narrative around, yes, the league is continuing to grow. Yes, it's still alive, which, as you mentioned earlier, makes it unprecedented territory as it is. And I do think, and this is, I think, why I'm not totally freaked out by the lower attendance this year, is I feel like this is sort of what it means to just have a more mature league. Like, it's not always going to be an upward, steady trajectory. And I think that's okay. In some ways, that's like healthy. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in a glass half full mood, but I do think that having Denver and Boston around, especially as these teams continue to grow and sign players, going back to our point about star power, there's a lot of potential for both of those teams to make some big swings as they continue to build their rosters. So I feel good about it. I think as the money continues to grow too and investments continue to grow, I know Kay mentioned that even in Chicago, they are specifically investing in marketing, which sounds like was not always the case with that club. So what's that going to look like with these expansion teams too? But I feel good about it. I think I'm sure the league will be happy to have more potential for bigger numbers. And I can imagine that both of those teams are not going to be going for those big swing record-breaking moments like we've seen in the past.
Yes. I mean, it is one-offs. I mean, this has always been the case, right? When you think about U.S. women's national team attendance versus NWSL attendance, so much easier to sell a one-off or inaugural season, an inaugural game, compared to the grind of an NWSL season, which feels like it goes on forever. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how this plays out the rest of the year and then moving forward into 2026.
Totally. We're hurtling along. And I mean, playoffs are basically like breathing down our necks as we speak. So that's our episode for today. But we will be back with you next week. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Thank you to all of our guests. Thank you especially to people who took time to write to Theo on Blue Sky, to leave us voice notes. We really could not have done this show in particular without you. And we appreciate everyone's efforts and intention to engage with us like that. If you didn't know, The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to deliver the very best coverage of women's sports, not only women's soccer, although you'll find a ton of that, all delicately and conveniently packaged in a women's sports hub. So if you haven't checked that out yet, make sure you do at sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. I couldn't find my place in the script, but the link will be in the show notes. I'm telling you guys, I've been partying a little bit too hard. I still haven't memorized it.
I'm Meg. You can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky. Unlike Tamerra, I am in pure fall mode, so I'm trying to soak up all the foliage here in Vermont, some apple picking, who knows. And again, a friendly reminder that you can watch all of your favorite full-time episodes, including this one, over on YouTube at The Athletic Full-Time. Give us a like and a subscribe.
I'm Tamerra Griffin. I need to hydrate and probably take a nap or two later. But you can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky as always. Full Time is not possible without our podcast producer and data cruncher and immaculate chart creator, Theo Lloyd Hughes. Thank you so much, Theo, for all of your work in gathering the information that we needed to get through this episode. Our video producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. Thanks again to everyone who's listened and participated, and we'll see you next week.